So what I want to take you through today really is, as part of our approach to risk analytics, I'm going to kind of split it into two areas. So the first thing I want to talk a bit about is our design principles that we used when we were developing initially and when we still continue to develop the products going forwards. And then after that, I'm going to finish by sort of saying how we've applied some of those design principles to our future developments that we've got coming out over the next, let's say, 3 to 4 years, I think. So, okay. So in terms of design principles then, it's quite a nice segue from Mike's presentation, really, because there's only a few bullet points on here, but the first one is ease of use. We are very, very aware that people typically, Mike's possibly an exception, you know, it probably spends more time in the product than most people, but on the whole, people don't spend every waking moment in our products. We'd love them to, but that's just not the reality of the way risk analysis is run today. So making them simple and easy to use is absolutely key to any kind of a successful adoption of the product. Process driven. So actually, I think Richard and Mike have both already sort of touched on that, Mike in particular. Again, because these tools aren't used often, the last thing you want to do is to open them up and then have to look around and hunt around for how you use the tools. So providing you with, as we have in Safran Risk, and as we're also trying to do in Safran Risk Manager, so the new risk management product that's coming out the end of this year, early next, is to guide you through the process of either running a risk analysis or of managing the risks in your particular project. Okay, so relevant for the right person at the right time. What exactly do we mean by that? Well, about, I guess, probably 2 years ago now, blimey, time goes quickly, although last year didn't, we introduced the cost module. So that really made us think about this, relevant for the right person at the right time, because to that point, the product had been, Safran Risk had been predominantly aimed at planners and schedulers, and therefore, having a Gantt chart, the embedded Safran project in there, was quite right, quite correct. And for most of our users, it's a familiar environment for them. But when we introduced the cost module, it's a little bit different, because cost engineers typically are used to more of an Excel type of user interface, and all the ones we spoke to weren't particularly happy having to run any kind of a cost analysis by adding resources to schedules. It's just not an environment they're used to or comfortable with. So, so we've deliberately built the cost module so it's more familiar to people coming from an Excel background. And in fact, we have a tight Excel integration where you can actually do all your work in Excel if you like, and then bring in your cost model from Excel and use Safran Risk for the quantification of that cost information. And I guess all those things sort of come back to something you've probably heard me mention before, and I'm sure Richard mentioned as well, and that's sort of this kind of phrase we use, the democratization of risk. So we really believe that risk should be something that all members of the project team are thinking about and involved in, whether it's from a cost side or whether it's from a schedule side. And to that end, I'd actually encourage you to attend the a session on Tuesday that Frederick Dahlberg will be given, and that's SRA and Safran Risk. So Frederick's going to take you through sort of the hows and whys of moving from our built-in SRA module to Safran Risk. So how and why you should think about doing that. And the final point, really, in terms of things we thought about when we were designing the product, was this enabling a cohesive consensus building approach to risk analysis, which, as it says there, is of course a very subjective topic. And I guess Mike has already actually mentioned one of the great examples of that. So as Mike said, quite often in the past and in many other products, people would be running risk analysis, and then when it comes to actually reporting the results, so what effects are my risks having on my project, those numbers would be coming back as correlation coefficients, as Mike mentioned. And it's very difficult to get buy-in from a team of people when you're saying the risk of a crane falling over has a 0.56 correlation coefficient, because nobody really understands exactly what that means. So we went to great lengths to actually develop the sensitivity analysis, which does allow you to report the information in a way that everybody can buy into. So if you're talking about schedule and the effects a risk has on your schedule, then you talk about days, hours, or perhaps even minutes. And if you're talking about cost risk analysis, then you talk in dollars, pounds, NOx, etc. So that's one way we've tackled this kind of last bullet point on here. Another way is actually with the way we've introduced weather calendars. So historically, people would be able to enter sort of kind of some templated information to model weather calendars. But with this point in mind of building a consensus amongst the team, we allowed you to introduce weather data as time series information. So you could take 10 years, 20 years, 30 years of historical weather data and actually bring that into Safran Risk. So clearly, if you're talking about 10 years of real information, that's something that's really easy for the team to get buy-in to. Right? It's difficult to argue with facts, and that in this case, that's what that was providing. Okay. So they're just some of the design principles that we've used building the product. My last slide is I want to talk a little bit about the future and the sort of short-term future in terms of Safran Risk and where we're taking the product. So we've based this kind of roadmap around 3 themes. So the best practice modeling and management, tangible and responsible feedback, so giving you what you want when you want it, basically, and objective-centric risk management. So giving you the tools you need to solve your business problems, not just random reports for the sake of it. So they're the themes that we've loosely attached this the functionality in this roadmap to. So I mentioned a moment ago that we have a new risk manager product coming out shortly. So unsurprisingly, one of the first things we want to do with Safran Risk is to provide immediate integration with that product. So that will be coming out early next year, a link to a bi-directional link to Safran Risk Manager. Enhanced schedule metrics. So this is actually something that we've heard a lot about from our customers. I guess it's as true today as it ever has been that one of the biggest problems with particularly with this schedule risk analysis, is the quality of the schedule. And again, Mike just mentioned that, right? That's one of the most difficult things to get right. So in Safran Risk, we today have a schedule warnings area that helps you to be aware of any issues you might have from a risk perspective in your model. But we can see that there's room to really enhance those metrics. And in fact, we're working with some partners in the DOE in the States to actually include some advanced schedule comparison capabilities. And we see that's really useful because from a risk analysis, you typically run through multiple stage gates. So you'll be bringing in projects through different phases. So to have a really slick and advanced way of looking at what's changed in your schedule from one risk review to the next, we see it as very valuable information. So that's something we'll be including as part of our enhanced schedule metrics package, along with potentially some merge bias reporting, so some statistics on the complexity of the schedule that you'll be running a risk analysis on. Resource risks. So we already have the ability to put risk around cost, either cost performed by resources on the schedule or cost that's separate in our cost module. But this really finishes off the puzzle there, if you like, and allows you to put risk around all of the resources in your schedule, such as the quantities, etc. Enhanced reporting. So again, this is a similar thing to the enhanced schedule metrics. This is something that's come up a reasonable amount over the last 2 or 3 years, where we've had some requests where customers want to be able to just effectively kind of hit one button and have an automatic report or series of reports generated for them, if you like, a report pack, sort of similar to the way you can in Safran Project. I guess one difference here is what we want to do with it in Safran Risk is to produce a customizable dashboard that's built into the product, where you can build up this report pack into a dashboard, and then at the press of a button have this dashboard automatically reported out for you. So combining some enhancements to the UI with enhancements to the actual reporting engine itself. So risk breakdown structure. So this really is a continuation of the Safran Risk Manager integration. In Safran Risk Manager, we have lots of different ways of categorizing risks, not just the risk breakdown structure. Safran Risk to date has had quite a flat structure, so we see it as a useful enhancement to be able to incorporate the risk breakdown structure either from Safran Risk Manager or to perhaps build one inherently directly in Safran Risk itself. I guess this is a little bit more on the reporting side again, but obviously many of you out there we know are using various BI tools. From most people I've spoken to, Power BI seems to be far and away the most commonly used one today. So we will be looking at providing much tighter integration into these BI tools going forwards. You can, and customers already are, actually integrating Safran Risk into their BI tools. And they're currently doing that in more of a manual fashion. So we want to really make this as slick and again, as easy to use as possible, coming back to that design philosophy of ours. Scatterplot cluster analysis. So for those of you that don't know, the scatterplot in Safran Risk is primarily used to show you how confident you can be of hitting your combined cost and schedule kind of confidence level. So, but within the scatter plot, there's often various clusters that form. So we can glean some extra information from those clusters. So that's something we're looking at for probably the year after next, is to build on that quite substantially. And we see that as being more and more useful as people start to adopt, as more people are, a fully integrated cost and schedule model. Mitigation optimization, one of the most exciting, I think, enhancements we've got on the roadmap. So this is basically allowing you to automate the process of running lots and lots of different mitigation scenarios and finding out which one gives you the biggest bang for the buck based on, it could be any objective, right? I mean, typically it would be a cost benefit, but there might be other parameters you want to drive that by. So that's coming shortly. Smart risk mapping. So this is allowing you to automatically map risks to certain parts of your schedule. So maybe you have some activities, maybe within your project you have 4 or 5 different geographical regions, and you know that you want a different level of risks to be assigned to activities in different geographical regions. So if you have a coded value for those regions, then you'd be able to use this smart risk mapping to automatically assign risks based on that coding structure. And the final item on here is risk impact timeline. So very much like it sounds, this is presenting you with a kind of a timeline of the risks and when they're likely to impact you. And that will then, of course, allow you to react faster to the risks that are near term versus the ones that are a little bit further away. So that's the end of my presentation. And I see Richard's just joined me.
Thanks, Glenn. Yep, that's a good update for everybody. And as you said, Frederick on Tuesday at the technical session next week will go through in a bit more detail some of the reasons why you might want to move from SRA within Safran Project into a fuller risk environment. There are lots of benefits to doing that, and Fred will cover some of that next week. And I know there are lots of Norwegian users watching us today who've got SRA and maybe would be interested in making that move upwards. So thank you for that.
Okay, you're welcome.